you imagine, for example, that you have a very successful bakery, you have a fleet of delivery trucks, and then the bakery gets into some trouble and people start selling off the seats from the delivery trucks, the carburetor, the transmissions. And pretty soon those trucks don't run anymore because people have been extracting value from the functional unit, which is the business. And so in a certain sense, that's what's happened to the United States and other developed countries, is that we have a leadership class that seems to be particularly adept at selling off the future in order to pay for their consumption in the present. And so whether it's through printing or sweetheart deals or legislation written by lobbyists, any of the standard games that people play in Washington, D.C. and in New York and in Silicon Valley, we have a tremendous amount of extraction going on. And then there always needs to be a cover story as to why the extraction is taking place, because nobody's sympathetic with people saying that the wealthy should put even more into their pockets at the expense of everyone else. And so that's where we are.
Yeah, I have a quote from you here, and you said, in general, the idealism of every age is the cover story of its thefts, unquote. And I think, it's a very apt description for especially the fiat reality we currently inhabit. You have Jerome Powell on TV saying we're going to print money to solve all these problems and inflation's not an issue.
I thought he would say that. You usually say something about much needed stimulus or relief.
Right.
Or assistance or unfreezing. There are all sorts of different names for what people do, but it's never print money.
You're absolutely right. I may be reciting it in my own translation here, but you're right.
No.
Quantitative easing, relief, increase the debt ceiling, all of these euphemisms to disguise the extraction, as you say. So I think you made the deep point where you say inauthenticity is inseparably bound up with authenticity in some way. And the way I understand this is that, I think Terence McKenna said this, all language is a lie. So we need these communication protocols to connect with one another and interoperate and collaborate, compete effectively. But the symbol is never the referent, right? The map is not the territory. So there's always this gap between reality and our representation of it, where we can introduce noise or deception or incoherence of some kind. And it appears to me like this is nowhere more prevalent than politics today. It's almost entirely, as to your point, it's almost like professional wrestling entirely. People don't take it seriously at all. And I would argue that this has a lot to do with breaking the tie, right, between what money was intended to represent, which was gold. So the dollar was the symbol for gold, right, for this referent. But then when we broke away from that, you're essentially giving the political layer unlimited latitude to spin up whatever illusion it wants, fund it via printing or other extractive methods. And there's no check on these illusions. There's no way for anyone to call their bluff. Because, historically gold was...
Satoshi would disagree with you.
Well, Satoshi has given us the way to call the bluff. But it's early days, right? So
yeah.
Is there a connection here, I guess, between, and my perspective would be that there's a connection between the inauthenticity injected into money and the inauthenticity that has come to inhabit our political speech?
Sure. Yeah. Those things are very closely tied together. Because you should think about printing as deferral and redirection of consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So we both defer the reckonings, and they will happen now after there's much more tinder built up in the system. That's one issue. And then it's also a redirection, because if you print the money, that is that you dilute everyone who already holds something, and then you direct where the money you just printed is to go, then you're not only devaluing and debasing the currency, you're also redistributing the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And so those two features, of course, you're always going to tell us that you're doing it for public spirited reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but you're diluting and you're redirecting based not on gold, but of course on lead. Different element. It's by virtue of Weber's theory that a government is a monopoly on violence, that the government can throw you in jail if you refuse to play ball by its rules. And how does it do that? By maintaining a monopoly on violence. So effectively, when you stop being gold based, you become lead based.
So that's a great point. That politics itself, the reason we're even listening to one another's political leanings and having these political debates is ultimately because the monopoly on violence works, which is to say that violence can be wielded to extract property. And again, violence in the broadest sense of this could be coercion, could be compulsion, could be a nasty letter from, one of the alphabet agencies. But the fact that there is a central group that can impose itself on your property rights is the reason we've become so attuned to one another's political leanings. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, my hypothesis is that this emphasis on politics as such an important part of our individual and group identity is based on the violability of property. So the fact that our individual opinions can so affect one another has kind of forced us into this very politicized culture. And here's maybe a thought experiment. If property were not violable, would politics matter, right? Assume we're all invincible. Our person and property cannot be assailed against. Why would we even care about one another's opinions, right? We would just, if you think one thing, I think another. If we don't agree, we just go our separate ways, live in separate places.